I know I have. There's a lot of visitors, a lot of new faces here. I think over the course of this month we'll have a lot of visitors coming and going with many of the different things we have happening. We usually have an afternoon youth meeting, but in place of that meeting this afternoon, as we have Brother Peter with us, we're going to move into a question and answer session. So people have submitted their questions in. I think we have about 7 or so questions in total, and we're going to run through some answers to those. And it'll take us, I think we've scheduled a bit over an hour to do that. So I'll pass over to Brother Peter to continue.
Don't worry, just a little kitty cat. All right. That's not Photoshop. That was in Zambia. It was awesome. So let's see here. Is that big enough for everybody? A little bit better. Okay. Very good. It would be nice to see some of you all move a little bit over this way so I can have an eye with everybody. Right now, you guys are hiding behind this thing, so somehow, if we kind of move over this way, it'll be really nice. I know you're all used to your own seats in your church, and you don't like to move from that seat. I know what it's like. In Roanoke, I have my seat too. All right, it would be nice to have, let me get some of these things out of the way too. I know you guys don't like me moving this stuff around, but I like to see people when I'm talking to you. So it would be nice to have these questions a little bit earlier so I can go through them, but we'll do what we can to share some of these things. The first question that came out, is the Reformed movement God's church on earth? I mean, that's a subjective question, okay, because everybody thinks they're in the right church, okay? So let's evaluate this for a few moments here. First of all, we need to understand that there is a church of God. Okay, let's understand that. So Colossians chapter 1, verse 18, it says that this is speaking of Christ, he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, etc. So Jesus is the head of the body. And what's the body then? What's the body? If he's the head of the body, what is the body? The church. Okay, he is the head of the body, the church. Okay, so the church is the body of Christ. Now, when we talk about this body, we need to keep something in mind. In volume 4, page 18, it says that every believer, and this is something very important for every one of us as members to evaluate here. Every believer should be wholehearted in his attachment to the church. Its prosperity should be its first interests. And unless he feels under sacred obligations to make his connection with the church a benefit to it in preference to himself, it can do far better without him. Okay, so when we're looking at our church relationships, we need to be wholehearted in our relationship to the church, and it needs to be, our connection with it needs to be in a benefit to the church more than to ourselves. When we talk about what is the church, okay, because a lot of people tell me that they believe their church is the church of God, and then they're not faithful to that church. They don't support that church in tithes and offerings. Half the time they don't attend there, something is wrong. Okay, because you're supposed to be what? Faithful to that. But we'll come back to that in a moment. Right now, we need to understand something. We talked about the truth last night, and what is the truth, and how Jesus is the truth. Now, we need to understand something, that in order to understand church and all the other things related to it, we must understand the truth. Now, you cannot understand the truth without the Holy Spirit. John 16, verse 13 says, Howbeit, when he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he will do what? He will guide you into all truth. So how do we get to know the whole truth? How do you get to know it? Holy Spirit guides you there. Okay, now, do you think the church is part of that whole truth? Let's look at 1 Timothy 3 and verse 15. Paul says, but if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the what? The pillar and ground of the truth. So the church of the living God is the pillar and ground of the church, truth. So then, do you think the Holy Spirit will guide you to the true church? If he guides you into all truth, and the church is the pillar and ground of the truth, then what? He must guide you there. And I've met a lot of people over the years, they don't know how they ended up in our church. Of all places, here they are. How'd you get here? Well, God brought you here. Okay, there's different circumstances, different things, but God brings you to his church when you are ready for it. Now, we need to understand something about the establishment of that church. Matthew 16:8 says, and I say unto thee that thou art Peter, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So the church is built on what? Upon the rock. That rock, in 1 Corinthians 3:11, says, for other foundation can no man lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ is the foundation of that church. When we say Jesus is the foundation of the church, what do we mean Jesus? The word Jesus? I had a guy one time, he was Jesus, Jesus all the time, okay? Jesus, Jesus, every time you turn around he's talking about Jesus. Anyway, he needed a car, so he bought my car. Okay, I was making payments on it, and I decided to sell it to him by him just taking over my payments. Okay, I was young, okay? I was maybe early 20s at that time. I didn't know all those details about what happens. And he took the car and never paid one payment. He was supposed to make payments, didn't pay one. Okay, and the company eventually, it was from California, where I bought the car, and I was living in Maryland. And they came to collect the car. And he said, take it. Nothing, didn't tell me anything. It was about 3 months later, and my dad gets, because he co-signed the car, they let him know that they're picking up the car from Baltimore. And we had to intercede. I got the car back. His Jesus didn't help him any, okay? The guy was a thief. All right, so when we say built on the foundation of Jesus Christ, we're not talking about the name Jesus. Okay, what are we talking about? We learned already last night from Volume 3, Selected Messages, that Christ is the complete system of truth. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So when we say Jesus is the foundation, we're talking about what? Not the name Jesus, but what? The complete system of truth. And more specifically, in great controversy, the subject of the sanctuary was the key which unlocked the mystery of the disappointment of 1844. It opened to view a complete system of truth. What opened the complete system of truth? The sanctuary doctrine. It opened to view a complete system of truth. So here it is, the complete system of truth. Connected and harmonious, showing that God's hand had directed the great Advent movement and revealing present duty as it brought to light the position and work of his people. So what we find here is that Christ is the complete system of truth. The sanctuary doctrine in 1844 unlocks the complete system of truth. Therefore, this church that we're talking about, the foundation of Jesus Christ, is understanding of the sanctuary and the complete doctrines that are associated together with it. That is the church of the living God. This church has authority. Let's go back to Matthew 16. We read verse 18. We'll start again 18. This time we'll add verse 19. And I say also unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So this church that is built on the rock Jesus Christ, which is understanding the sanctuary doctrine, which unlocks the whole complete system of truth, upon this church, God has given the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Now, we're not going to spend any more time on that part. However, there is something required of that church. In John chapter 17, verse 21, it says that this is the prayer of Christ just before his crucifixion. It says that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee. That they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. So this church must be united. It's not everyone everywhere. It has to be in unity. This is why in volume 9, 146 to 147, it talks about that unity. It says those who are truly converted will press together in Christian unity. Somebody is truly converted, what are they going to do? They're going to press together. It's an action. They'll be actively working towards unity. I met many people over the years, and they told me, do I need to join your church? And I told them, wrong question. That's not the question. Okay, why? Because we don't need just people joining the church. We don't need a whole bunch of church members. What the question is, how can you be converted? When a person is converted truly, naturally, they will join the church. This is why, volume 5, 47 to 48, a union of believers with Christ will, as a natural result, lead to union with one another, which bond of union is the most enduring upon the earth. It's a natural result. So when I remember studying with some people, and they told me they will never join our church. I said, I will never join your church. Don't ever ask me. I'm never going to get baptized here. I'm never going to join this church. But they're willing to study. So it's just fine with me, as long as they're willing to study. We start studying. And after a while of studying, suddenly I get a different question. And the question is, do you think I'll ever be ready to join this church? And how many times I'm standing in the water and the person says, do you remember when I said I'll never get baptized? Well, how could I forget? I mean, it was very clear. But what happened? You don't focus on church membership. You focus on unity with Jesus Christ. Once a person is united with Christ, the natural thing is baptism and unity with the church. It's a natural result. Okay, it's not a forced result. It's natural. In Sanctified Life, page 85, it says, unity is the sure result of Christian perfection. In other words, the more perfect you are, what happens? The more unity we'll have. So in a church that has dissension, what do you know? There's no unity. They're disunited. They're not united to Christ. Something's wrong there. So the solution is unity in Jesus Christ. And again, not the word Jesus. Talking about Jesus is the complete system of truth. It's as we become united in the truth, both not just word-wise, not to articulate the truth only, but to actually live it. Matter of fact, I'm just reminded here of a statement in Desire of Ages. Page 309. You want it a lot bigger than that, I guess? Let's do it for this time here. Where's the... I know, but I can't see it anymore. It's... Okay. This computer is very, very... let me see here. Just 1 second here. Okay. So here, Desire of Ages, page 309. The Desire of Ages 309. The greatest deception. Is there a greater deception than the greatest deception? Is there one? No, greatest is the top of the line. The greatest deception of the human mind in Christ's day was that a mere assent to the truth constitutes righteousness. Okay? And people think, oh, if I just make a profession of faith, then I'm righteous. No, that's not it. In all human experience, a theoretical knowledge of the truth has proved to be insufficient for the saving of the soul. And it goes on and explains different things. So in reality, what we're talking about here is not just a profession of faith, but a faith that we are living in. And in Review and Herald, December 6, 1892, if we are united to Christ, we shall be united to one another. And so in my work over the years, it didn't matter what a person believed. It didn't matter what church they belonged to or no church at all. The issue was, are you willing to study the Word of God and get to know Jesus Christ? And once we embarked on those studies, and if they accepted the truth as they're learning it, the natural result was church membership. It was natural. It didn't happen anything differently. So now, there's a prophecy about this. In John chapter 10 and verse 16, it's a wonderful prophecy. It says, and other sheep I have which are where? Which are not of this fold. Now, what happened? So if a sheep is not in, okay, let's finish the fold first. Other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be what? One fold and one shepherd. How many folds? How many? One. What is the fold? Volume 6, page 261. But the church is very precious in his sight. It is the case which contains his jewels, the fold which encloses his flock. What's the fold? The church. Okay, so we can read the statement above. And other sheep I have which are not of this? Of this? What's another word for fold? Church. Other sheep I have which are not of this church. Okay, so whose sheep are they if they're not in the right church? Whose sheep are they? It says other sheep I have. And that's why when somebody comes to tell me you have no right to sheep still. And my question was, who said they were your sheep? They don't belong to you. You know, one time I had when I moved to Maryland, I had some tools. And I was working on the church building in Temple Hills. And all of a sudden, I couldn't find my drill and my saw. They disappeared. I couldn't find them anywhere. And so I wasn't sure. There was a neighbor guy that used to come to the house, but I didn't see him come that day. You know, and so I'm baffled, but I need to cut something. I had to cut a tree down. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy me a chainsaw. On my way there, I saw a sign for a yard sale. It was next door to the neighbor that they used to come to my house, a young kid. And I come there to look and see what is there, and guess what? I find my tool. I find my tools there. And I said, this is my tool. I start picking it up, and the people say, you can't take that. I said, it's mine. They said, no, it's not. The neighbor brought it, and it was the guy. I said, no, you bring him over all you want, but this is my tool. I don't need permission to take my tool back to me. And actually, it would belong to my uncle originally, and it was so old but I needed it, you know. And so it was a drill. I couldn't find the saw until that evening. That neighbor, I saw them cutting down a tree. And now that I have a chainsaw, I thought, let me go help them cut down the tree. So I go back to see what they're doing. They had broken my circular saw and cutting the tree with my circular saw. I picked that up too and took it home. Okay. The point is that doesn't matter where they're at, they're still his sheep. So the fact that my tools were at that yard sale does not make it belong to that yard sale. It's mine. Okay? And so I took it. So here's a prophecy that, notice here, other sheep I have which are not of this church. Them also I must what? Bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one church and one shepherd. So it shows that this prophecy, that in the future, there will be one church. And how do people get to know what is the right church? It says they shall hear my voice. You don't need to sit there and do anything. If you're familiar with the voice of Jesus, you will recognize his voice there. Why is it so important to belong to this church? Actually, Apostles, page 11, paragraph 2. The church is God's fortress, his city of refuge, which he holds in a revolted world. Any betrayal of the church is treachery to him who has bought mankind with the blood of his only begotten Son. From the beginning, faithful souls constituted the church on earth. So we find here that the church is a fortress. And in this world today, we need a fortress. You need to come inside. When there's an enemy outside, what do? Run where? To the fortress. You can't handle the enemy alone outside. So, is the Reform movement God's church? Well, you're going to have to study the doctrines first. I can't, for me, obviously I'm here. But you have to know the doctrines. You have to get to know the voice of Jesus. And when you get to know the doctrines and start understanding the truth, especially the sanctuary and the investigative judgment, three angels' messages that we've been talking about here, when you understand that, all you have to do is hear, where is that being taught? And you will know what the church of God is. Obviously, I believe it's here. But until you're convinced of that, my conviction is not going to help you. You have to know for certain for yourself. Clear? Let's move on to the next one. Please explain about the visible and invisible church. Okay, so we kind of mentioned a few things already, so this was a good follow-up question. In volume 5, page 619, it says, as members of the what? Visible church. Oh, wait a minute. Members of what? Visible church. What I'm really surprised is when people talk about the invisible church and they want to collect visible tithes and offerings. That's my confusion. Okay, if you want to be an invisible church, then keep it invisible. Okay, but they want to collect everything to themselves. Okay, wait a minute. No. There is an invisible church, true. But that invisible church is what? What is it? What does invisible mean? You can't see it. Okay? There are people in this world that do not know the truth as we know it. In Romans chapter 2. In Romans chapter 2, what is it? Just wait a minute, just wait a minute. No, it's the one by creation. It's not chapter 1, is it? Hold on, it could be chapter 1. Yeah, chapter 1, verse 20. Romans chapter 1, verse 20. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even the eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. In other words, God is speaking to people throughout the whole world. Just a moment here. Okay, so there are people that do not know the doctrines that we know, and some of them will be saved because they're living through what God has revealed to them in nature. Desire of Ages 638, paragraph 2. It says, those whom Christ commends in the judgment may have known little of theology, but they have cherished his principles. Through the influence of the divine Spirit, they have been a blessing to those about them. Even among the heathen are those who have cherished a spirit of kindness. Before the words of life had fallen upon their ears, they have befriended the missionaries, even ministering even ministering to them at the peril of their own lives. Among the heathen are those who do what? Worship God ignorantly. Those to whom the light is never brought by human instrumentality. Yet they will not perish. Though ignorant of the written law of God, they have heard His voice speaking to them in nature and have done the things that the law required. Okay, that's your invisible church. They're not going to church. They don't fellowship with each other. They're not giving tithes and offerings. That's your invisible church. They're scattered in different places. And so we find here, again, as members of the visible church and workers in the vineyard of the Lord, all professed Christians should do their utmost to preserve peace, harmony, and love in the church. And we need to understand something. You want to have effect in evangelizing the world. You know, we talk about, we hold an evangelistic meeting and hardly anybody comes. Okay? And we're wondering what's going on. It's quite simple. Here it is. It goes on. The unity of the church is the convincing evidence that God has sent Jesus into the world as its Redeemer. The world is convinced by unity. Why is unity the convincing thing? Because we're all different. We come from different cultures. And even within the culture, we're different, okay? Sometimes you end up having the same culture, same everything, and they still fight with each other, okay? When you have people of different ideas and mentalities and characters meet together and are united, that is a miracle. That's not normal. And so when we are having divisions in the church, that is normal without Christ. That's normal, okay? So when people are united, that's the evidence that Jesus is the Redeemer. That's the evidence. This is an argument which worldlings cannot controvert. Therefore, Satan is constantly working to prevent this union and harmony that unbelievers, by witnessing backsliding, dissension and strife among professed Christians, may become disgusted with religion and be confirmed in their impenitence. And I met a lot of people that are totally disgusted with religion, and I completely understand them. I totally understand them. Why? Because the religion is disgusting. You know, when you look at, when I was working in London some years back, and one day the train was, they closed the tracks where I needed to go, and I had to take the bus. So this time I had to actually go through all the streets of London. Church after church was closed. Church after church. All London, lots of churches, all of them closed up. Why? Because people are sick and tired of that kind of church. Simple as that. And so the church needs to exemplify Jesus Christ in their life. And the biggest evidence of that is working together in unity. Unity does not mean that we always agree. Okay, there's an interesting Bible verse in Isaiah 52. Let me see here. Isaiah 52, I believe it is. Isaiah, Jeremiah. Okay, before I read the verse. Do you think two people can be united who talk at the same time? You think two people can be united and they talk at the same time? Can you be united and talk different things at the same time? No, you say no. I say it's possible. Let me explain. Last year, when we moved to the United States and we were moving there, I promised my wife, I promised her to hear Handel's Messiah in Carnegie Hall. And last December, we went to Carnegie Hall. It was absolutely amazing. And you hear the Hallelujah chorus. They're singing different words. But what is there? There's still unity. Okay. And this is why I love Isaiah 52. Isaiah 52. Verse 8. It says, Thy watchmen shall lift up the voice. With the voice together shall they sing, for they shall see eye to eye when the Lord shall bring again Zion. Okay, so obviously, in order to have different words, you must have what? What do you need to have? What do you need? You need the same conductor. Got to have the same conductor. Okay, so there they were in Carnegie Hall and listening there, and we got these really beautiful, we're right there. We're right above the whole thing, okay? It's absolutely amazing. And sitting there listening, you know, and it was absolutely amazing. It just takes your mind up to heaven. And they're singing different words, but the same conductor. And so this verse teaches me that sometimes, even in church capacity, sometimes people are saying something different. And if you stop and listen, many times I find they're saying the same thing. They're saying absolutely the same thing, you know, but we're not listening. You know, maybe Nathan may remember this one. When we had the missionary school there in America, and they were about ready to graduate, and we still haven't gotten a name officially for the missionary school, our Covey Bible Institute. And our the school board, we had one member just holding off. Nope. We had a Covey Bible Institute, the name for, you know, at least a year before that. And he said, nope, cannot be, cannot be, cannot be. And finally, what's the problem? Nope, that name is wrong. That name is wrong. And he goes on, and he finally, but what's actually the problem? He said, it has to have the word Bible in it. What? Yes, it must have the word Bible in it. And for over a year, it said Covey Bible Institute. For a whole year, what was he doing? Not listening. And you see, we could have saved ourselves a lot of time. And I think, and many times in church, I've seen this happening. I'm sitting there listening to the dispute in the church. And I'm dumbfounded many times because they're saying the same thing. And you have to stop and listen. And so when I learned this, that you could actually be singing, and the unity of the church is compared to singing a choir. That's what it's compared to. It's not talking about one person speaking, it's a choir. And when it's conducted by Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, guess what? It's going to have harmony. So that is the unity we're talking about. We're not looking at everyone singing soprano. I'm not going to sing soprano, sorry. Okay, that's not going to happen. Okay? I'm not going to sing alto, but I will sing baritone. Okay? But anyway, but nonetheless, the point is that when we're talking about unity, we're talking about that oneness. That's what we're talking about here. But let's go back a little bit more into this thing, because when we talk about the visible, invisible church, the idea is usually that we don't need to be members of a church. So let's take a look. Education, page 268. It says, another obligation, too often lightly regarded, one that to the youth awakened to the claims of Christ needs to be made plain, is the obligation of church relationship. What does the word obligation mean? Responsibility, a requirement, yes? And that means we have a requirement to have church relationship. The next paragraph says, very close and sacred is the relation between Christ and his church. He the bridegroom, the church the bride. He the head, the church the body. And then listen carefully. Connection with Christ then involves what? Connection with his church. So if Christ is the head, the church is the body, and we are, in 1 Corinthians 12 is talking about we are body parts, right? We're parts of the body. Now, imagine this little finger. Instead of being here, it wants to be connected directly to the head, so it sits up here. What would you look at that? You'll consider that weird, right? Well, it doesn't belong here. And guess what else is? Sitting up here, it is useless. Here, it has a job. Here, it is useless. So that means that when we're connected to God, you're connected to Jesus Christ. He puts you where? In the body. Why? Because our responsibility in the church is not just to be members of the church. Notice the next paragraph, still in education. The church is organized for what? For service. Why do I have a finger here? It has a job. It has a place. It has a work to do. You can't just have it just sitting there. It has a place to do. The church is organized for service. And in a life of service to Christ, connection with the church is one of the what? First steps. If you've given your heart to the Lord, you want to serve Christ, what's the first thing you need to do? Join the church. Okay? And notice this. Loyalty to Christ demands the faithful performance of church duties. We're in January right now, right? January? January, okay. And what happened towards the end of the year? Towards the end of the year, you have something called church reorganization, right? And what happens when you have church reorganization, especially if your church is getting a little larger? You have a lot of members saying what? I don't want to do anything. Well, then you are disloyal to who? Notice it. Loyalty to Christ demands what? The faithful performance of church duties. The willingness to do whatever is necessary. In a couple of months, there's a reorganization of what? Of the field. How many people are going to say, no, not me, not me. Don't want to do anything. Remember this statement. This is not my word. This is Education 268. Loyalty to Christ demands the faithful performance of church duties. Why? This is an important part of one's training, and in a church imbued with a master's life, it will lead directly to effort for the world without. In other words, I need the training. I need the discipline. And one thing I want to mention, sometimes people even say, I've heard how many people say, I don't want to be on any committees. Why? They tell me the committee is a miserable place. It's horrible. And I had a chance to work with some of these people. Okay, and you know what I found out why they don't want to be on the committee? Because it's my way or the highway. They have their view and nothing else. Excuse me. In committees, you have to learn how to do what? Work together. And that's the amazing thing. And that's why I've been really appreciative of the different committees I've been on over the years. And it's been wonderful. We've been wanting to accomplish the same thing, you know. I used to hear how horrible General Conference Committee is the worst. You know, and I've been on that since 2007, and we've been actually having a wonderful time. We disagree sometimes. Okay, we have disagreement, but we still like each other. Okay, we can disagree on something, and many times we have to put it to a vote. And whatever's voted upon, we decide that we have to support it. I mean, why? Unless it's principle, okay? And that's a rare thing that we're dealing with. We're dealing with just methods. And if it's a different method, so what if it's not my method? Put your best explanation forward. And if anything else, if you get outvoted, if anything else, you have to learn how to give a better presentation. You need to learn and evaluate it a lot better. And that's why it's an important part in one's training. One statement, I do need to let you know that originally I was a very anti-church organization guy. There was a time in my life, yes, as a teenager, when I got baptized and then I got into totally independent ministries and everything else, and I totally did not believe in church organization. But I did believe the Bible, and I did believe the spirit of prophecy. And so statements like this in Life of Paul, Sketches from the Life of Paul, page 31, were very challenging to me, that I had to change my viewpoint. It says, the Redeemer of the world. By the way, who is that? Who is that? Jesus, okay. The Redeemer of the world does not sanction, experience, and exercise in religious matters independent of his organized and acknowledged church. That's a very serious statement. And when I read this for the first time, it was very revolutionary in my thinking. I was so thankful to the Lord that I had bought all these Spirit of Prophecy books at the time. And as I was reading them, it had to change my direction. Many have an idea that they are responsible to Christ alone for their light and experience, independent of his recognized followers on earth. But in the history of the conversion of Saul, important principles are given us, which we should ever bear in mind. He was brought directly into the presence of Christ. He was one whom Christ intended for a most important work, one who was to be a chosen vessel unto him. Yet he did not personally impart to him the lessons of truth. He arrested his course and convicted him, but when asked by him, "What wilt thou have me to do?" the Savior placed him in connection with his church and let them direct him what to do. Can you imagine being brought into the presence of Christ? He convicts you, and you ask, "What do you do?" And he says, "Go to that obscure guy over there in Damascus, and he's going to tell you what to do." This obscure elder, by the way. Okay, not a minister, not an apostle, not somebody great. This obscure elder over there in this church, and he's going to explain to you what you need to do in life. Are we prepared to do that? So, there is an invisible church, yes. But that visible church is invisible. It's literally invisible. You don't know who it is, where it is, but we are to be members of the visible church of Christ. And again, how do you know what is that church? You need to understand the voice of the shepherd. Jesus says, "My sheep will" what? They will what? Hear my voice. Get to know the voice of Jesus, and it'll be very clear. It'll be very clear to you what that is. All right? The next question, I'm going to be very brief on this one. I'm going to give you homework instead. The question is what to do. Explain how to deal with doubt about my salvation. You know, Romans 1:17 says, "The just shall live by faith." Faith means you don't know everything. By nature, faith. You don't need faith if you know something. If you have zero doubts, if you're absolutely certain, you don't need faith. I don't need faith there's a table right here, okay? I don't need faith at all for this. No need for this whatsoever, okay? Faith is when you don't have this. And so in our Christian experience, the devil brings us doubt. The question that you have to ask yourself is, have I surrendered my entire life to Jesus Christ? In Review and Herald 1908, it says, "The righteousness of Christ is revealed from faith to faith." That is, from your present faith to an increased understanding of that faith, which works by love and purifies the soul. So in your Christian experience, yes, you're going to end up having doubts. What do? Study again. Get to know what God is telling you. Are you living outside of His will? And if you settle everything and you give your heart again to the Lord, then just trust in Him. Right now, if you're doubting on your Christian life, right now, quietly just ask God to come into your heart and take care and surrender everything to Him. And yes, it's going to change you. You can't live the way you are. Okay? The way you're going, you can't stay that way. You will be changed if you do this. But by faith, trust that God is going to take care of you. Steps to Christ, chapter 12, it's called What to Do with Doubt, page 105 to 112. So do read that. It has been a blessing to me over the years because it's natural to start doubting, especially as the closer you come to Jesus, you're going to start questioning things. Again, I'm not talking about when you know you're doing something wrong. Okay, when you know you're doing something wrong, you need to confess that to God, ask for forgiveness, and ask Him to change your life so you don't keep doing it. We're not talking about that. But if you don't know, then you need to trust in the Lord that He's taking care of you. So just read Steps to Christ, chapter 12. It's the best explanation that we can give to you for that, all right? Moving on. Please explain how the people in this verse did not taste death. And it's Matthew 16:28. Verily I say unto you, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the Son of Man coming in His kingdom. All right, so this is Matthew 16, and there are some questions in the spirit of prophecy of a similar nature, dealing with some similar statements there. And what I can share with you is two things. One is Matthew 17, verses 1 to 5. So that's Matthew 16, verse 28. And then, soon after that, it says, after 6 days, Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, and bringeth them up into a high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them. And his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias talking with him. Then answered Peter and said unto him, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, one for Moses, and one for Elias. While he yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. So here you have, they've taken up to the mountain. They heard the voice of God saying, This is my beloved Son. They had Moses and Elijah there. In Desire of Ages 421, it says here, the Savior's promise to the disciples was now fulfilled. Upon the mount, the future kingdom of glory was represented in miniature. Christ the King, Moses the representative of the risen saints, and Elijah of the translated ones. So here you had Moses and Elijah symbolizing with Jesus Christ the whole kingdom. So yes, they did not taste death till they saw that. It didn't say that they're going to see Jesus coming in the clouds of heaven, by the way. Notice here, it says, there be some standing here which shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in His what? Kingdom. And that was the kingdom right there. So they went there and they saw Jesus transfigured. In other words, it was glory. So it was completely a glorious event there. So they saw the glory of the kingdom of glory. So that's how that verse was fulfilled. And so I moved this question up a little bit there out of order because it's connected to this one here. It says, please explain how people at this conference, some will be alive and remain at Jesus' coming when they all died. Okay? And they're quoting Volume 1, 131 to 132. I was shown the company present at the conference, said the angel, some food for worms. And the commentators there say Sister Clarissa M. Bumfay, who fell asleep in Jesus just only 3 days after this vision was given, was present in usual health and was deeply impressed that she was one who would go into the grave, and stated her conviction to others. And so, some food for worms, some subjects of the 7 last plagues, and some will be alive and remain upon the earth to be translated at the coming of Jesus Christ. So how can this be fulfilled? The original statement was published in 1856 in Volume 2 of Spiritual Gifts, 208 and 209. And I do want to read a little bit about what she says about this Sister Bonfay. It says, Friday about 7 o'clock, she fell asleep. She had her senses until her eyes were closed in death. She stated that her pilgrimage was almost ended and that she had no fears of death. We united in prayer, and she responded. She kissed us and bid us an affectionate farewell. She seemed very solicitous for my health and was grieved if I manifested distress. We were unprepared for her death. To lose her was a living loss. 8 years she had shared our joys and trials, and she had never proven untrue. We have missed her cheerful society and her sisterly affection and her care in our family. We laid her in Battle Creek burying ground to rest until the sleeping saints awake to immortality. All right, so it's important to understand that she died and she's going to resurrect when? When they have immortality. This is the second coming of Jesus Christ, okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, okay. I didn't have time to put the rest of the notes in there. All right. So, what I want us to look at in order to understand this properly, we need to start with Daniel chapter 12 and verse 2. Daniel 12, actually, starting with verse 1, and at that time Michael shall stand up. This is, we know it's the close of probation. And then, after the close of probation, it says, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. Now, notice here, this is a time of trouble, like which time of trouble? Such as never was since what? Since there was a nation. What's the first nation in this earth? The Babylonian, okay? Babylon was the first nation, okay? When did that happen? That was after the flood. Therefore, this is a time of trouble upon nations. It's important to understand the distinction here. Why do I mention that? Let me just go quickly over here to Matthew chapter 24. Matthew 24, verse 21. It says, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. This is different. This one is what? A tribulation, not since when? Since the Garden of Eden. And the big thing was the flood. Okay, that was horrible. The one in Daniel 2 was since there were nations, not this one. These are two different things. This is why we understand this to be the 2300-day the 1260-day prophecy. But we go back to Daniel chapter 12. And verse 2 then, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So here is a resurrection, and it's not a resurrection of everyone. It says many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth, okay, shall awake. Some of this many to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. That's quite different than the resurrection mentioned in the book of John. John, in my mind, is chapter 5. Verse 25. Verse 25 says, for verily, verily, I say unto you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God. And they that hear shall live. Okay? Now, verse 28. Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming in the which all that are in their graves shall hear his voice. How many? All. Daniel 12:2? Many. Yeah, or some. It says there are many, right? Here it says all that are in the grave shall hear his voice. And notice verse 29. And shall come forth they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. So here you have the resurrection of life and a resurrection of damnation. Two different resurrections. Okay? Going back to Daniel chapter 12, verse 2. Many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. So here you have one resurrection, two groups of people in that same resurrection. Is that clear? Now, if we go to the great controversy, page 636. And here we have here, I just want to read the last sentence there. It is done. It's quoting Revelation 16, verse 17. So before we read any further, let's just go to Revelation 16 and verse 17, just to know the context here. Revelation 16 and verse 17. It says, "And the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, 'It is done.'" So this is the beginning of the seventh plague. This is after the close of probation. Clear? So now, great controversy. The context here is beginning of the seventh plague, when the words are, "It is done." And I'm going to skip one paragraph. And then on page 637, paragraph 1, it says, "Graves are opened." So when you hear the words, "It is done," at the beginning of the seventh plague, graves are opened. And quoting Daniel 12:2, "Many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." So the Daniel 12:2 resurrection happens at the beginning of the seventh plague, not at the second coming of Jesus Christ. Okay, so beginning of the seventh plague. And now notice here who resurrects. It continues. "All who have died in the faith of the third angel's message come forth from the tomb glorified to hear God's covenant of peace with those who have kept his law." So who resurrects? Of the faithful. All who have what? Died in the faith of the third angel's message. In early writings, it adds keeping the Sabbath, by the way. So Sabbath keeping in the third angel. There was a third angel's message before the Sabbath, by the way. Okay, because God did not need another denomination to introduce the Sabbath to the world. In the United States, the General Conference was organized in 1812. Did you know that? General Conference, 1812. I know you're familiar with the one in 1863, but there was a General Conference of Sabbath keepers organized in 1812. It was called the General Conference of Seventh-day Baptists. Okay? And they had over 3,000 members already in 1812. In November of 1833, they made a resolution to pray for the Millerites. Why? Because they're not keeping the Sabbath. Okay, so they set aside a day of fasting and prayer for the Millerite movement in 1843 in November. Okay, so, but the Seventh-day Baptists never accepted the sanctuary. And that's why God needed, the third angel's message was the sanctuary message, and the Sabbath as part of the sanctuary message. So all who have died in the faith of the third angel's message, keeping the Sabbath, came forth from the tomb glorified to hear God's covenant of peace with those who have kept his law. By the way, how many, after this moment, how many who died in the faith of the third angel's message remain in the grave? How many? None. Why not? Because all who have died in the faith of the third angel's message are resurrected. They are resurrected for a reason. Notice here, they also who pierced him, those that mocked and derided Christ's dying agonies, and the most violent opposers. Sorry. Wait a minute. Let me go back up here. All who have died in the faith of the third angel's message come forth from the tomb glorified to hear God's covenant of peace with those who have kept his law. Why are they resurrected? What's the reason? To hear the covenant. So do they hear the covenant? They must. Why? Because that's the purpose for their resurrection. They're resurrected for that purpose. Therefore, they must be able to hear the covenant of peace with those who have kept his law. So now, continuing great controversy, let's understand a little bit about this covenant. So this must be afterwards, because notice here, the voice of God is heard from heaven declaring what? The day and hour of Jesus' coming and delivering the everlasting covenant to his people. So this voice of God must be after the beginning of the seventh plague. Why? Because the ones were resurrected at the beginning of the seventh plague. They're resurrected to hear this everlasting covenant. They're resurrected for that purpose. Therefore, all those who died in the faith of the third angel's message will be alive when Jesus comes, before Jesus comes. They'll be alive already. And of course, in early writings, page 14, well actually 15, paragraph 0, it says here, soon we heard the voice of God like many waters, which gave us the day and hour of Jesus' coming. Same event, when they hear the everlasting covenant. And then it says the living saints, 144,000 in number, knew and understood the voice, while the wicked thought it was thunder and an earthquake. Since the ones who died in the faith of the third angel's message are alive at this time, that's why we understand that the 144,000 is composed of all those starting in 1844 who understood the Sabbath and accepted the third angel's message. So, going back to this question here, please explain how people at this conference, and this conference was in 1856. It was an 1856 conference. It says, please explain how people at this conference, some will be alive and remain at Jesus' coming when all died. Well, it's quite simple. They did die, but they're resurrected in a special resurrection. Therefore, they're alive when Jesus comes. So they will be alive to see the coming of Jesus Christ at that time. So that's how they will be fulfilled. And some will be subject to the 7 last plagues. Why? Because the most bitterest opponents are also resurrected at that time. And so if somebody was a bitter opponent of the truth in those times, they will also be resurrected to experience the 7 last plagues. That clear? Next one. How is Christ referred to as the begotten when we're told he exists for eternity? Either he is begotten or he's not. Please explain. And the verse is given, John 1, verse 18. No man had seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he had declared him. So is Jesus begotten or is not begotten? And let's throw in one more Bible verse in here. You know this verse very well. John 3, verse 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his, what? Which begotten? Which begotten Son? Only begotten Son. And whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Okay, so only begotten. So wait a minute, only born? Is that the idea? Only born? Well, let's see how the Bible uses this term. I'd like to introduce you to Hebrews. I know we're going through the Sabbath school lesson of the book of Hebrews, and I'd like us to look at Hebrews chapter 11. We know that this is the chapter of faith. And let's see here. 17, yeah, okay. So in verse 17, I want you to understand this verse here. By faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that received the promises offered up who? His only begotten son. Wait a minute. What do you mean only begotten son? Is Isaac Abraham's only begotten son? Is he or is he not? Did Abraham have a son before Isaac? What's his name? Ishmael. So you have Ishmael and you have Isaac. But Isaac is called the only begotten son. Does that mean that Isaac is called the only begotten because Isaac is the only one to be saved? Is Ishmael going to be saved? Are you going to meet Ishmael in heaven? Patriarchs and prophets. This is page 174. Abraham's early teaching had not been without effect upon Ishmael, but the influence of his wives resulted in establishing idolatry in his family. Separated from his father and embittered by the strife and contention of a home destitute of the love and fear of God, Ishmael was driven to choose the wild, marauding life of a desert chief, his hand against every man, and every man's hand against him. In his latter days, he repented of his evil ways and returned to his father's God. But the stamp of character given his posterity remained. The powerful nation descended from him were turbulent heathen people who were ever an annoyance and affliction to the descendants of Isaac. So Ishmael's going to be saved. And yet, Isaac is called only begotten son. So what made Isaac only begotten? So only begotten does not have reference to only born. Matter of fact, if you go to Genesis, at least by the time of Hebrews, he should have known this. In Genesis, chapter 25. Then Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. And she bare him Zimran, and Joksham, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua. So there's a few more kids that Abraham had. So even if you consider the time that Isaac was taken up on that altar, there was at least one, you still had one son. Okay, if you count later, he had even more sons. So therefore, we have to understand that Isaac has, the being the only begotten had a different meaning. When we go to the issue of Isaac, in chapter, 15, after 15, after chapter 15, then you have the issue of Ishmael. Chapter 17. Abraham is 90 years old and 9, and the Lord appears unto him, to Abraham, and talks about the covenant. And by the way, most of us remember, when Sarah was told she's going to have a son, what did she do? You remember? Anybody remember? She laughed. Okay? What did Abraham do when he was told that he's going to have a son? Through Sarah. What did he do? You don't remember that part. Everybody remembers Sarah's laugh, okay? Let me show you here what Abraham did. Verse 17. It says, then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed. He was laughing and falling on the floor laughing, okay? It was worse than Sarah, okay? And what was the problem? And he said, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? A 90-year-old woman's going to have a child? And back in those days, she was still past her days of life. In other words, it was impossible for Sarah to have a child. If we look at Hebrews chapter 11, Hebrews chapter 11, let's see here, before this, it's talking about Sarah there. Here it is, verse 11. Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Okay, so Sarah is definitely past her childbearing years. Okay, so when Sarah had a child, Isaac, it was what? What do you call that? It was a miracle. So the issue of only begotten in the context of only begotten of Isaac and only begotten of Jesus has to do with some miraculous thing. Therefore, it has nothing to do with prior to Bethlehem. It has to do with Bethlehem. Jesus is the only begotten Son of God because in Bethlehem it was a miracle. It was not normal for a woman who has never been with a man to have a baby. It's impossible. And yet this happened. Now, I have a question for you. Can you call Jesus the only begotten before Bethlehem? I hear no. Well, let's take a look. Let's evaluate this. Before I explain why, let me ask you a question. When did Jesus die for our sins?
From the foundation of the world.
Okay, so let's understand something here. First of all, when did Jesus die? I can give you the date. What was it? We know the date. When did he die? You know the date. When was it? 31 AD. Is that a fact? Okay, so Jesus died. We know he died in 31 AD. There's no question about that. That's a proven fact. But can you consider him dead before 31 AD? Let's look. No, the sacrifices were not Jesus. Okay, so let's go to Revelation 13, verse 8. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb, slain from? Wait a minute. 31 AD or for the foundation of the world? Why does he say here the foundation of the world when we know the fact is 31 AD? Huh? Huh? Let's look at Hebrews chapter 6. Hebrews chapter 6. Verse 13. For when God made promise to Abraham, because he could swear by no greater, he sware by himself, saying, surely blessing I will bless thee, and multiplying I will multiply thee, etc. So, notice here, God made what? A promise. Then verse 16, for men verily swear by a greater, and an oath for confirmation is to them an end of strife. Wherefore God, willing more abundantly to show unto the heirs of promise the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath. So, number one, God makes what? Promise. Then he confirms it with an oath. What does that mean then? Notice verse 18. That by two immutable things, in which it was impossible for God to lie, we might have a strong consolation who have fled for refuge to lay hold upon the hope that is set before us. So number one, so when we see here, two immutable things, when God makes a promise, confirms it by an oath, it's as if it was done. So, God promises that Christ is going to die for the sins of the world. He confirms it by an oath. 31 AD becomes irrelevant as far as terminology is concerned. The moment he made that promise and confirmed it by an oath, which was at the beginning, at the foundation of the world, that moment, it's as if it was done. So now you can call him the Lamb slain when? The moment he made the promise and confirmed it by an oath. That means that if he is slain from the foundation of the world, he was the only begotten when? From the foundation of the world. Even though the literal only begotten happened when? In Bethlehem. And the death actually happened in 31. So the slain lamb, 31, birth in Bethlehem, approximately 4 BC. And you can call him only begotten anytime as soon as he made the promise and confirmed it with an oath. And that's why he is the only begotten son, irrespective of the fact that he was only born in Bethlehem at that time. Because he was only begotten just like Isaac was only begotten. Is that clear? All right. Next one here. We're getting close. Oh, wow, 3:30 already. Boy. Okay, let's just do a couple more here. What about setting dates for the return of Christ? Some people, even Reformed, say Jesus must come by 2030, 2027, etc., due to the earth existing for 6 millennium. And now the 7th millennium is a rest. What is the position on setting dates, years for the end? First of all, we need to understand something. The second coming of Christ has nothing to do with how wicked the world is. When COVID came, and oh, this is a wicked world, this is going to be the end of the world, you know, Christ is coming soon. Christ is now going to come. Why? Because the world is so wicked. Wait a minute. When is Christ going to come? Let's take a look. In Mark. Okay, let's look here. Mark. When does Jesus come? Mark 4:29. But when the fruit is brought forth, immediately he putteth in the sickle, because the harvest is come. When is the harvest? When the fruit is ready. The focus is the fruit, not everything else. So there is no focus on the wickedness of the world. That's the wrong focus. That's why, as we mentioned when we're studying the three angels' message, you start studying about the beast, you have just lost focus. I mean, we got to study the beast. Okay, we got to know what's there. Okay, God gave it to us. But if our focus is the beast, we have missed the whole point of the three angel messages. And when we're studying the signs of the times, when we are focusing on the earthquakes, when we're focusing on disasters and the plagues and everything else, we have lost focus. The second coming of Christ happens when the fruit is ready. What is the fruit? Let's look at Christ object lessons. Page 69. When the fruit is brought forth, immediately put it in the sickle because the harvest is ripe. Christ is waiting with longing desire for the manifestation of himself in his church. And now listen here, very importantly. When the character of Christ shall be perfectly reproduced in his people, then he will come to claim them as his own. It has to do with the character of the church. When the character of the church is ready, then comes the second coming of Christ, not before. The close of probation, when does that come? Notice Revelation chapter 7. This is, brethren, this is basic Adventism. We need to study basic Adventism. And basic Adventism teaches me what? Revelation 7. Verse 2, and I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the four angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their forehead. The destruction of this world, the 7 last plagues, is not happening until the 144,000 are sealed. Simple as that. The focus here is that the sealing of the 144,000. And what does that mean? Obviously, then Christ's object lessons make sense. The focus is perfection of God's people, not just individually. I want you to notice here, Christ is waiting with a longing desire for the manifestation of himself in individuals in this church. Is that what it says? No. It's in what? In the church as a whole. There has to be a purified church. Okay? Obviously, the purified church happens when individuals in the church are purified, okay? I understand that. But it's still waiting for the whole church. When the character of Christ shall be perfectly reproduced in his people, then he will come to claim them as his own. Look at basic Bible verses. Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 5. When Jesus comes again, what is he going to find? Verse 27. That he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. If you're thinking that the church of God is going to be impure till the second coming of Christ, wrong church. We mentioned the church of God before. There has to be a purification of God's church. There has to be a change in our characters. And so, it's not a matter of time, it's a matter of what? It's a matter of purification of character. Now, having said that, let's look at some other points. Revelation 10, verse 5 and 6. And the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that are therein, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which are therein, that there should be time no longer. Here's a prophecy, no more time. What does that mean? 1888 materials, page 959. The Lord showed me that the message must go and that it must not be hung on time. For time will never be a test again. What is it? Time will never be a test again. I saw that some were getting a false excitement arising from preaching time, that the third angel's message can stand on its own foundation, and that it needs not time to strengthen it, and that it will go with mighty power and do its work and will be cut short in righteousness. When people begin focusing on a date, it means they don't know the third angel's message. The third angel's message does not need time to boost it. Okay? So it's never going to be a test again. Again, page 953, 1888 materials. The times and seasons God has put in His own power. And why has not God given us this knowledge? Because we would not make a right use of it if we did. If we knew the time, we wouldn't know what to do with it. A condition of things would result from this knowledge among our people that would greatly retard the work of God in preparing a people to stand in the great day that is to come. We are not to live upon time excitement. We are not to be engrossed with speculations in regard to the times and the seasons which God has not revealed. Jesus told His disciples to watch, but not for a definite time. His followers are to be in a position of those who are listening for the orders of their captain, etc. Now, years ago, we had this guy. He was coming to church, and he was preaching time. You remember him. And by the end of the year, it didn't happen. Guess what? He revised it. It's the next year. I told him, you keep this up. 1 year, you're going to be right. 1 year, it's going to happen. He didn't live to see it, actually. I did his funeral not long ago. I went for his funeral service. Okay. He didn't make it, okay? All right. But his followers are to be in a position of those who are listening for the orders of their captain. They are to watch, wait, pray, and work as they approach the time for the coming of the Lord. But no one will be able to predict just when that time will come. For of that day and hour knoweth no man. You will not be able to say that He will come in 1, 2, or 5 years. Neither are you to put off His coming by stating that it may not be for 10 or 20 years. So we have no business setting time. Now, why then 1844? Obviously, there was a time. That was the end of the time prophecy. That had to be there. Now, let's take a look at something. Matthew 24:36. Let us understand this a little bit here, the Bible verse itself, because this is actually a prophecy. Because there is a time that we're going to know when Christ is going to come. Did you know that? Did you know it's going to be revealed to us when Christ is going to come? Let's take a look. It says, but of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Oh. Who knows the day and hour? The Father. Does Jesus know? Let's find out this, okay? So Mark 13, verse 32 says, but of that day and that hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father. Does Jesus know when He's coming? Do the angels know when they're going to come? Is God a God of order? Do you think in heaven there's going to be out there, everyone's minding about their own business, all of a sudden the Father says, hey, time to go. Stop what you're doing. Time to go to earth. Is that going to happen in heaven? Let's understand something. Okay, so let's understand. I want to, the same Greek word that is used, translated know here, is translated know here in 1 Corinthians 2 verse 2. Paul says, for I determined not to know anything among you save Jesus Christ and Him crucified. So Paul went to Corinth, and what did he determine? What? Not to know anything. So one day Paul is out there preaching, and they ask him, Paul, Are you hungry? And what does he say? I don't know anything but Christ and crucified. Paul, would you like a spoon? I don't know anything but Christ and crucified. I mean, is that what it means? One of the definitions of no, if you look up your Greek concordance, you're going to find the word to tell or to make known. And here, if you look at this, Paul didn't determine not to know or have knowledge of anything, but for I determined not to make known anything among you, save Jesus Christ and crucified, right? To what? So let's take a look. So, but of that day and hour maketh known no man. No, not the angels. So the angels are not going to make it known. A human being is not going to make it known. The angels are not going to make it known. The Son, Jesus, is not going to make it known. Only who will make it known? The Father. In other words, it's a prophecy that the Father is going to make it known. And we read this already. Early Writings, page 15. Soon we heard the voice of God like many waters, which gave us what? Day and hour Jesus. Oh, who makes it known? Will the saints now know it? Yes, they'll know it. Will they reveal it to anybody? No, only the Father reveals it. But the faithful will know. The 144,000, the living saints, 144,000 in number, knew and understood the voice. Well, the wicked thought it was thunder and earthquake. So the 144,000 are going to know for sure. But there's no purpose to reveal it. Why not? But the probation is over. Okay, therefore, the idea here is that the Father only is going to make it known. No one is going to make it known. And in Desire of Ages, but the day and hour of his coming, Christ has not revealed. He stated plainly to his disciples that he himself could not make known the day or the hour of his second appearing. Had he been at liberty to reveal this, why need he have exhorted them to maintain an attitude of constant expectancy? So we find here that Jesus knows, okay, the angels will definitely know for sure. They're going to just suddenly jump and let's go. No, God is a God of order, but it's shown to us that it's going to be revealed only at that time. And therefore, if somebody is talking about the date, whatever it is, since the day I entered the work, it's been the day and they've been prophesying the day. Okay, I mean, I went to Maryland. I was 19 years old, and the first thing I had to deal with is the Jubilee's coming, and this is the only Jubilee. And I went to go to this meeting there. Some friends of mine invited me to go there, and I went to this meeting. And the guy's preaching, and I shared some of these thoughts to him, and then I asked him a question. If it doesn't come now, when is he going to come? And he says, the Jubilee does not match for another 1,000 years. Okay, so basically, if it's not here, it's going to be 1,000 years from now. Okay, every few years, it's always somebody coming up. It's next year. It's 2 years from now. Y2K was a big one. One of our church members, poor brother, I went there to sit down and try to help him. And I actually went there, I think, for 2-3 months. Once a week, I went and did my penance for one day a week, several hours a day, listening to him, trying to explain the prophecies all over again. And the problem is I could not respond to him because he had only suppositions. There was nothing I could say, okay, this is wrong, because he just had ideas. And it was interesting. I was just coming here to Australia in end of 1999, and we're going to go up there, Elam Heights, and the brother told me, he says, you can't go to Australia. He says, because there's not going to, because once Y2K comes, there's not going to be electricity, and you can't even come back to America. And I said, so what? I can stay in Australia. And I said, and guess what? Y2 came early at Elam Heights. The generator blew. Okay, and they have no power up there, so it came early, so it came a few days before. I said, so it's not a big deal, and I remember at the GC office, I lived in that field, so I was working nearby there. So I was visiting the GC office for some meetings or something, and some people came, and Brother Sass was the GC president at the time, and they had to meet with Brother Sass and us and warn us about Y2K. And they're trying to, we're there in the committee room, and he's really warning Brother Sass. And he says to Brother Sass, he says, look, brother, what's going to happen when you no longer have electricity? And Brother Sass replied so calmly and coolly, he says, then I get to finally go to sleep on time. It was funny. So it's been repeating itself over and over again. This is nothing new. They've been doing that since 1844. And all I can say is we don't need time to bolster our belief. If we study the sanctuary message and the three angels' messages, brethren, it is exciting. When you start sharing the gospel with the world, when I'm working with somebody and they give their heart to Jesus Christ as their personal Savior, I'm telling you, that is the most exciting thing I can say. When somebody who is definitely determined not to accept the gospel, they're determined to show you that no way, they will never accept it. And then you're praying to the Lord and they accept the gospel. I mean, it's amazing. I'll never forget one experience. Unfortunately, the brother got some things happened in his life. But, you know, I remember I was visiting down in Florida. And there was this guy. He was interested in the daughter of the lady that I was studying with. And we were actually having meetings in her home. So she set up the living room as actually our church in Miami at the time. And as I was sleeping there, this guy, I was sleeping there in that same room that we were having meetings at on the couch. And at midnight almost, the guy comes in with his friends with church's chicken, and they're sitting there on the table, you know, eating that chicken and everything else, making a lot of noise. Finally, I thought, look, all right, Lord, I'm going to get up. There's nothing, these guys are hopeless, okay? So I came up to them and I told them, why are you guys making your stomachs a burial for dead animals? And that stirred him up, and he started talking and asking questions and asking about the law of God. I actually, after midnight, went to that room. I still had my board there, so I could write on the board and explain a few things to them. But he didn't want to hear it. He was Pentecostal. He didn't want to hear it. So anyway, not long after that, Hurricane Andrew came through. And when the hurricane came through, his family and all the other families ran to that church there that we had there, of that sister, thinking that this place is not going to, when the hurricane hits, this is the only safe place. And they stayed there, and for like the next 3 or 4 weeks, they actually came to church because they thought this is the safest place that could be. And later on, she moved to Tallahassee. And the nearest church was, I think, about 4 hours away in Jacksonville. And I used to go there every 3 or 4 months, and this guy would not, he dropped his mother-in-law off. By this time he got married, dropped his mother-in-law off, and he'd go out and stay out until she's ready to be picked up. Now, one Sabbath I go over there, and I see him and his wife sitting on the front row. I'm thinking, okay, what is this about now? Okay, he made it very clear what he thinks about our religion, but he's sitting on the front row, okay? And I'm preaching, and I start asking questions in my sermons, and he puts his hand up. I said, seriously? What's he going to do? And he answers the question correctly, you know. And I think, boy, what is going on here? I really want to know, but I was too busy. The whole day we were just having one thing after another. I just didn't have time to talk to him. And then that evening we had the communion service. And at the end of communion service, we said, who would like to share a testimony? And he puts his hand up first. I said, I got to hear this. You know, and he explains the last time he came to drop his mother-in-law off, they went and he was determined to have his church's chicken. He got there and he had such a stomach ache. He was sick for days. Okay, he determined not to eat meat. And he never ate meat now for 4 months. And he comes over there after 4 months, and now his mind is clear. He starts attending worship with his mother-in-law, and now he's in church. And I had the privilege of baptizing him and his wife, you know, eventually. You never know. You look at people's character. You don't know who they are. And all I know is when you are sharing this message to the world, there will be conversions. You're going to see the people that you least likely think of. As a church, you know, I want to share a Bible verse with you. Romans chapter 5. Romans chapter 5 is a really important chapter. And let's see here. Okay, Romans chapter 5. We need to understand. Let's start with verse 6. For when we were yet without strength, in due time Christ died for who? The ungodly. For scarcely for the righteous man will one die, yet peradventure for a good man some would even dare to die. But God commended his love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. When we are looking as a church to invite people, who are we inviting? Are we trying to invite reform-minded people to our church? Or are we trying to invite sinners to our church? That's the big question. I remember years ago when I was working in Tennessee, and we had this camp meeting. We had lots of visitors. We had lots of visitors. It was a wonderful camp meeting. And there was this independent minister that he came for the camp meeting. And after the camp meeting, we were supposed to meet, but I decided not to waste my time with it. But anyway, he wrote in his blog, his magazine, about what he saw in the Reform movement. He says, I have not attended a Reform movement camp meeting in 20 years. And he says, I came to this camp meeting and it's shocking. He said it's shocking what he saw. The way people were dressing, the way people were doing all these different things. He named all those stuff of what he saw in our camp. And he says it was terrible. The Reform movement has gone down the wrong way. And when I read that, I said, praise the Lord. You know why? I knew. He described the very people I knew. They were all visitors. Sinners were coming to church. Sinners were coming to camp meeting. Okay, and many of them did not, some did not respond, but some came there and they changed. Their lives were changed. And sinners were coming, brethren. Can you imagine? They told about Jesus. Harlots and publicans are coming to him. Can you imagine having our divine service over here and a whole bunch of harlots show up to church? Would you be excited, or are you going to sit there, what are they doing here? Get out of here. Start dressing the right way. Get out of here. What are we going to do? Brethren, we have to understand that we are here for what? For sinners. We need sinners to come. Not to stay sinners, brethren. No, I'm not talking about that. When church members start to act like those sinners, we got to help them out. Come on, that's a different story. But I'm talking about as a church, we should be welcoming to sinners. Recently in Roanoke, we've had all sorts of people come to church now. And the wonderful thing, the most wonderful music to my ear was when some people who now are church members, but when they first came were totally not church members. And they tell us when they came to church, they felt like they were coming home. That's exciting. Okay, that's really, our purpose, we're fulfilling our purpose. And now, now that we're getting a little bit as a larger church, now you're starting to hear all these things coming up with, we got to make these rules and we got to do this and that to keep people out. Come on, be serious. Years ago, I remember seeing a camp meeting invitation. And on the camp meeting invitation, it gives you all the rules you got to comply with in order to come to the camp meeting. It's like, what on earth are you talking about? You're missing the point. I want sinners to come. That's the thing. So, going back to this, time is not an issue. That's not the issue. The issue is us, when God's people are ready. So we need to make sure that as we are being perfected in our Christian character, we're going to be seeking who? The lost, sinners to come to repentance. I know we're way past our time. Boy, I told you I'm not going to do 2 hours, and here it is, 5 more minutes to 2 hours. This is amazing. Okay, what if the church within the body is not organized for service, but is organized to keep their members spiritually fat? First of all, if you're not working for souls outside, you can't be spiritually fat. Okay, you're not going to be you're going to be spiritually dying, okay? So let's understand that. So what we have to look at is our purpose is to seek to save that which is lost. It's impossible to take care of your spiritual needs without working for souls. And so that means then that if you feel, and this is what I took it very seriously, when I saw things in our church that I felt were neglected, what did I do? What did I do? It's simple. I volunteered to lead that part out. If this is being neglected, if I see it's neglected, then I'm going to volunteer to do that. And so if the church is losing its focus, and keep in mind, it will lose its focus because the devil is there to get you losing focus. That's going to happen. The moment you realize that, come back to the Lord, and whoever sees it first, start making changes. And as a church, if you see that in the church that something is missing, then change it. Many times I've been in church capacity in different things. I've been to camp meetings. I've had no job at a camp meeting. I remember going to this one camp meeting. I was not a speaker. I had nothing to do there. And yet, I had tons to do. The moment I got there, I looked around and I was busy constantly. I didn't have a break. So if you recognize the need, satisfy the need. Go and do that. Go start organizing it for service. Take on a department. And it doesn't matter what department you take. You know, when you look at the early Christian church, you would think that the apostles probably were the most influential and most active in the church. And yet, an apostle was not the first martyr. Who was? A deacon. Can you imagine a deacon being the first martyr? Okay, in other words, Stephen was given the job of a deacon, and he made his job so important, more important than the apostles. He made it so important that when they came to do the persecution, he was first on the list. They had to get rid of that Stephen guy. And so you can be in church. I don't care what role you have. Whatever role you have, you need to make sure that you make it as the most important thing that you can do. And on the church administrators, you need to understand that you have to give everyone in church something to do. I was talking to Miguel a little bit earlier, and I was mentioning to him, I used to have Bible studies with, actually even now, whenever I have Bible studies with somebody, you know what I'm doing? I'm evaluating what kind of worker they could be. Yeah. Can they be ordained? Can they be a worker? What role in church can they be? You know? And as soon as they're baptized, I think to many times as a church, we do such a disservice. As a church, we're there welcoming a person. They get baptized. We have a fellowship service. We extend the right hand of fellowship. And what should be next? What should be next? Before they go out and greet everybody, what should you do? Somebody should be there and say, here is your responsibility in church. This is your church responsibility. And make sure you find out what their capabilities are, Sometimes we look at a person, we give them a job they're not qualified for. And they fail at that job, and we think they're failure at everything. I remember one time, there was one brother. Actually, we hired him at the same time we hired Nathan, at the same time. And I'm sorry, he was not a Bible worker. I'm sorry, he was struggling along as a Bible worker. But I noticed when we had camp meetings and I gave him a responsibility, he'd organize everything. It's like, wow, this guy is doing good at this job, And so as soon as a secretarial office opened up, we made sure he was there. And he worked there several years. And several years later, he developed the Bible work part. Today, he's a minister. But at that time, he was not ready for Bible work, on his own. He just couldn't do it. But he was ready for something else that we can give him. And later on, he could do the same thing. So we need to be looking at people's abilities, what they are, give them a role in church that they could be successful in. And then you're going to have a living church. Then a church is organized for service. So if the church isn't doing it, well, change it. Make changes in that, and God will help you. Anyway, we've gone a little bit over time, but anyway, thank you all for your time, and we trust that all of you will have a blessing here. So kids, yes, that is a nice kitty cat. We met this kitty cat in Zambia. She was really nice. Her brother was really nice too. We had a nice time with both of them, taking them for a walk. And you know why you have a stick with those cats? You have to carry a stick with them. Did you know that? Do you know why? Huh? Well, if they don't behave, what do you do with a stick? No, you hit him over the head, and you're gonna be the cat's gonna let you know who's boss. Okay, so in reality, the stick is there because he's a cat, or she's a cat in this case, and her brother actually started getting a little aggressive. And what you do is with a stick, you just put it on the ground and you start moving it on the ground, and he's a cat. Okay, so immediately as soon as you have the stick there, he starts going like this. He starts playing with the stick. So they're very playful with a stick. Yeah, so that's why you carry a stick, so they can be playing with it. It was a wonderful experience. I miss the kitty cat.
Thank you, Brother Peter. We have two more very quick things before we close. I think Brother John has a question he has for everybody. So this time, instead of hearing answers, we're going to be asked to give an answer. And after Brother John's question, we'll have a band before we close.
On Thursday, I called people David is doing the roof of Kilo Church, and I meet him at the Kilo Church. He came and he said he got a batch of someone recommended him to be on board. And he said, I've been to hospital, so I just coming today to work. Why did you go to hospital? Microphone. I can speak with the microphone. On Thursday morning, I met David at the Kilo Park. He is doing the roof for the church. And he said, I just came yesterday from work because I've been in hospital. I said, why you been to hospital? He said, I give my kidney to my friend. I said, what? Yes, said, my friend needed my kidney because he was very sick. And I give my kidney to my friend. Now I ask you a question. Who do this? I got a plumber with us, Gerard, and he needs a kidney. Who would like to give a kidney to somebody else? And I know he's coming next week to do the roof. This man is coming next week to do the roof. We're going to tell him about our church, you know. We're going to tell him, you know, what we believe. But where is our faith and where is his faith? Trusting in God. It doesn't mean to give you kidney. You can give something else, you know. It's a big question, you know. It's not you know, I speak with lots of people about this, and everybody is just, you know, standing up. But this is one thing. When I was a little boy, before the electricity came, I saw a big light. But when I went to camp, not to the camp, to Sister Anna was taken to, what's it called, to immigration place. She just passed away last night. I went there, and you know what I saw on that face? Jesus. Brighter than the sun, brighter than anything else on this planet was her face. And we have that sister with us here for so long time, and we didn't realize what sister she was. Thank you.
And now our last item this afternoon will be the band, so I invite the band forward to practice, after which we'll take our free will offering and close. Just while they're coming forward, as a reminder to all those who are part of the choir that sung at the Sydney camp just now, that you'll have a short practice after the meeting is closed.